Mhm. Yes, that's live. Oh. It's on YouTube, right? Okay.
And so, excuse me, the total development cost of this project is about $9,550,000. Of that $9 million, about $4.2 million is coming from the city of New Orleans. About another $3.2 million in tax credit equity from the tax credit investor. Another $700,000 from the New Orleans Development Authority, and another $536,000 from the Housing Authority of New Orleans, and the rest portion of being a permanent mortgage on the project. I think that's really, and also the long-term affordability. And so the land is still will be owned by the Housing Authority of New Orleans, and so we will basically have a long-term ground lease, and it just was so we wouldn't have to worry about tenants being not having anywhere that they wouldn't be able to live after the affordability tax credit period, just because the Housing Authority, owns the land long term, and also working with the Finance Authority in New Orleans to have a pilot, on the project, and also the Affordable Housing Plan Development also requires long term affordability. So we have made that commitment to go exceed not only past the 15 years, but going at least to about 60 years, maybe 100 years, since Hanover always owned the land. And so we will always have long-term affordability, and not have some issues that came up with American Canyon in the article today that most folks have read in the paper. Unfortunately, that was about to happen to a civil rights icon in our city. And so I think that's really the gist of this project, and I'm open to answer any questions that you may have.
All right. So thank you for joining us. I'm gonna go ahead and forgive me, Steve. We're doing this for the record.
Gotcha.
Because I
Yes, I get you.
Because I've been following this project avidly for a very long time, and I'm very excited about it. But we want to make sure that as we have a robust conversation for the record here. So a couple things that you talked about. You have, again, as I mentioned, you've been working on this for a while, and I also want to make sure that folks who are as we're talking about the complexities of these projects and the things that y'all have to face, like for example, the pushback from the neighbors and the challenges that have been happening to get land that is owned by the housing authority, that was public housing land, that was purchased by quasi-governmental agency, basically held in a trust using federal funds to house low to moderate income folks, land that's been vacant for years.
17 years.
Yeah, and now there's an opportunity to redevelop it, and you're getting pushback from the neighbors. You were initially getting a lot of pushback from the neighbors.
Yeah, some pushback, and so some of the concern that neighbors had, unfortunately, when folks saw an empty site, they just thought it would be empty forever. And so, some of the pushback came from, residents who lived in the neighborhood, because now the demographics in the neighborhood is shifting dramatically. And so when you have a shift in demographics of the neighborhood, folks have concerns. When you hear low income folks, you automatically think that it's just poor people who will come and just come with a whole bunch of crime and other issues.
That's also the problem, because that's just not, this is how you stop crime, giving people opportunities.
Definitely.
And we often hear, well, even for seniors, which is an argument that makes me crazy, because you're accepting the premise that poor families are problematic, namely poor women and children are problematic, and somehow senior citizens are somehow different. But that you accept the premise of their statement that somehow that poor people are problematic. And in a city that is very low income, there's a need for this, and a need for senior housing in particular.
Yes, but one of the things that I expressed, I was born and raised in public housing. I lived in public housing the majority of my life. My grandmother moved into the St. Bernard housing development in 1942. when it was built. And so when folks have a negative stigma about, low income folks, I'm like, I'm a low income individual. I was born and raised. It's just that just because folks live in an impoverished environment don't mean that they're bad people. And so that was some of my greatest teachers that I found that was in the public housing environment, because even though they didn't have a lot of money, they talked and looked out for each other. Like that community, that, we hear about community and all that stuff now, but in public housing, we had a strong, tight-knit community. So whenever we have food in our house, I can easily go to my grandmother's house. I can easily go to a neighbor, ask them to borrow some sugar, or something like that to survive. And so that was a great part of living in public housing. Yeah, it was kind of terrible because you concentrated poverty, but they still have a lot of great people that came out of the St. Bernard development who are actually leaders in our city today. And so it's just unfortunate that people have a negative stigma when you talk about low-income folks and who living in certain low-income communities. It's very unfortunate, but we was able to, once I heard concerns, I would knock on people's door and talk to some of the neighbors. So it wasn't everybody. When you hear some folks were pushing back, it wasn't everybody in the neighborhood. It was just a small group of people, whatever the reasons were, that it was pushing back. But once I went and sat down and knocked on the doors and talked to people in the community, I quelled a lot of that. So folks were talking about parking. And I was like, well, most seniors don't really have cars, but we still having parking space for those seniors who might have cars. Folks talked about
How
flooding.
many parking spaces do you have?
It's 11 parking spaces. Folks talked about flooding. We can't control nature, Mother Nature, but we still had to abide by the stormwater management requirements of the city of New Orleans, and that's why we did, the zero scaling to be able to capture that rainwater, and also with the storage tank that we're gonna have underneath the ground, in that regard. And so we also heard about the concern of height, and that's why we made a total design revision of the height. It's a 4-story building, but it don't even look like a 4-story building. We kind of stepped down and we was conscious of that, and me instructing the architect to be able to, say like, hey, we want to have this building that it fits the historic fabric of the neighborhood, and which now you can see it don't look like a traditional kind of cookie cutter apartment complex. It actually looked like part of the neighborhood and the historic fabric in that particular community. And even the building, even the portion of the building that's to the right, and they have a house on the side of it. And so that's why we did kind of like the step down. If you look at the building, it kind of makes it look like it's several different buildings, even though it's one building. And so that was the consciousness that we had when I instructed the architect, the design team, is that we wanted to do something that's going to be blended in the community, and as time progresses, it's still going to have that look and feel of a typical historical building.
As you mentioned, the solar battery, the solar panels up at the top there, the backup battery and storage, so that the elevator will work during the power
And we
outage.
have a generator as well.
And the generator.
So we will have. So one of the things that we was thinking, and so the solar and storage allows for the creation like of a microgrid. I know I've been hearing folks talking about microgrids, and so that's what's going to help with solar and storage. But however, we still wanted to have some additional backup power, in the facility as well, to be able to, be able to power like some of the lighting that might be on the exterior parts of the building as well. And it helps for the long-term, reduce the long-term operating costs, of the building as well. So that's some of the stuff that, that I was thinking about for this sustainable developer.
Okay. I just think of a generator, what kind of, is gonna be, natural gas?
Yeah, natural gas, yes.
Not my favorite, but that's, I totally understand. We gotta get the technology right. Will microgrid allow people to have, individual breaks in their units, or is it just?
It's just gonna be for the common area.
Okay.
It's just if the facility, if the building was big enough, then we could have more solar panels and more storage. And since the building being so small, we don't have enough solar panels to be able to generate enough power that would be able to power the unit. Such as St. Bernard project, I think, did off of Broad Street.
What you're gonna be doing is, powering the common areas so people can get in and out safely.
Yes.
If the worst should happen.
Yeah.
And when something happens, it's not if, it's when something's going to happen.
And to be able to power their refrigerator. So I live not too far away from here, and I had it when all the power went out. we just don't have a generator in my building, so I was able to get an extension cord and plug my refrigerator out into the hallway and always be able to plug my cell phone, up. But as you know, if you have a bad disaster and natural gas can't get back in because those things run on natural gas, and if you don't have enough natural gas, then eventually the generator is not going to be working. And so that's why we was conscious of having the solar and storage and the generator to have all of that backup power to ensure that we always have power at the facility.
Well, that's great. I mean, that's one of the big concerns, one of the big disappointments in what ended up passing with the Healthy Homes Ordinance was it wasn't enough to prevent what happened last year with Hurricane Ida, which was people dying in their homes because of the standards that landlords were not being held to and then not being able to build up those standards. So really glad to see that a developer that Finance Orleans is going to be funding is already being proactive and it's not going to put senior citizens in harm's way.
Right, and I think that's the great thing about a public-private partnership, because me and Damon have had a lot of conversation over the years about, sustainability, and just, working not only with Damon and working with the city, and other agencies where everybody is focusing on, sustainability. So I also forgot to mention that, this project is gonna, meet those standards with enterprise green communities. And so a lot of those, standards that we all gonna be meeting, as well, to make sure that this building is sustainable and it lasts, for a very long time.
Well, that's all the questions I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I would like to, make a comment about the technology component, and just to that, Mr. Kennedy has been very open about addressing sustainability and obviously he's done it on his own. But we've also taken a step of having conversations with technology companies that have products that can be useful for this project and others. And ways of utilizing some of the public dollars and savings that we're getting with the property taxes to invest in those technologies. So we're trying to leverage public dollars as much as possible so that we create sustainability in neighborhoods. Because we know from our experience, we can build up as much housing as we want, but it has to be around 15, 30 years longer.
Right.
And we have to use biotech techniques, technologies. Doesn't always have to be something high tech, but we need to be forward thinking about how we address it and have developers like Mr. Kennedy being open to do this after the process.
And are we seeing any ability to help get the costs that are just really incredibly high right now, like insurance down with
So one of the things that I forgot to also mention that this building is going to be steel frame construction, so that's why the construction cost also is a little higher. So that should help reduce some premiums, because even if storm were to happen, the building will still be structurally sound, which also should help reduce some of the premiums, on the building as well.
that's it, yeah.
Thank you I forgot to mention that, so thank you for that.
Yeah, everybody's talking about insurance right now. Yeah, so it's a big issue, and I know that not everybody can move forward with projects. So we're glad to see that you figured out a way. And this is gonna be better for the building in the long run as well.
Yes, and even I also forgot to mention that locking in the contractor, because as you know, contract come with change orders, and so one of the things that I did got the contractor to agree to is a guaranteed max price.
Okay.
And so they wanted to do some value engineering, and so I was just like, hey, with value engineering, then folks come back with change orders to increase the cost. I understand contractors very well, so I got the contractor, the construction company, to agree to a guaranteed max price, and also having minority and women participation, DB participation on the project, as well. Is something that I forgot to mention, which I know not only you all, thankfully you all having minority developers like myself and Mr. Doucette, be able to present projects to you all, but we also conscious to be not only minority developers, but also being conscious to have minority contract and subcontractors participate on our projects as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, so next on the agenda. We're gonna skip everything and then go down to Iris Handle scan site presentation. So this is only for review today. We will be hopefully taking action on the Barone Villa project.
Rural loss, I'm sorry, I forgot to, yeah, it's rural loss actually.
Oh.
Yeah, it's just a mistake, yeah.
Thank
it's
you
a
for all
technical
loss. Thank you. I'm just reading.
I get you. It's all the same thing, yeah.
That's all right. Yeah, 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 yeah.
But you know, you have to go back to LAC and all those. So Vice Chair Morris, Iris handles scatter site project. Is one that we've been looking at for a while, talking to the developer, Mr. Curtis Doucette about. So Mr. Doucette is here today to talk about the project directly, but I'll give a high level overview of the project and the process that we've gone through internally as a staff to make sure that this project is the high quality type project that we want to invest in with our public resources. And we go through this process for every project. So the request today, well, again, this is a review, but the request that will happen in the coming months is for a pilot. And it's a pilot for a 52 unit scatter site rental project. So single family homes, but it's being developed and for use of rental project, or a rental project. Total development cost of $12.3 million. The funds that are going to support this project are fairly diverse. This is not a tax credit project, which we've been accustomed to seeing for most of our deals. But the developer has been able to obtain funding from the Federal Home Loan Bank of Dallas, possibly the Federal Home Loan Bank of Atlanta as well. There's funding from LAC, also from OCD. So this project does have a substantial amount of public investment, which is a good sign. And the developer has found a creative way to take public land and put it back in the commerce without necessarily using tax credit equity, which is great, but there are also other ways to deliver this project. So you have to see some diversity and creativity in the way the developers are looking at delivering units. But overall, this project is going to serve a multitude of neighborhoods. And those neighborhoods, as you learn from the developer, the project is being catered to those different neighborhoods to make sure it fits the fabric, and not just dumping units. They've been very thoughtful about how the units are going to be developed and spending some time with the community. There's a strong team. Mr. Doucette and his team have developed projects across the city for the last few years and in other markets as well. So we feel confident in their team. And the project is starting out at a solid debt service coverage, initial 1.15 and increasing as time passes, increasing to 1.82 by year 15. So that's the trend that we look for in the underwriting of these projects. Of course, a solid team, but also the feasibility of the project. And one important factor is that this project is also going to benefit from project-based vouchers. And those project-based vouchers add some stability to the revenue stream for this project.
But you're not, this project is just being presented for information today, just so we can get started talking about it. And,
Right.
Okay.
And so what we're doing right now is just communicating results about underwriting. And as you can see on the last bullet point of the 2-page summary, is that we do recommend approval of this project as the time comes. We think the project is feasible, has a strong team, and a strong overall plan. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Doucette so he can answer any of your questions and do a brief presentation. He'll walk through. And then, of course, no action today.
No action
This is setting up action for next month.
Imagine. Great.
Thank you, Desmond. Thanks for having me today. So I'm Curtis Doucette. I'm the CEO of Iris Development. Iris Development is for those who don't know us, we are a New Orleans-based real estate development company. We've been around since about 2012, and we've developed a few hundred units, most of them affordable at the very least mixed income, very much like this project. So this project, as Dan mentioned, is an award of an RFP from the Housing Authority of New Orleans. on scattered sites, mostly in the Riverbend neighborhood. Of these 52 units, only 6 of them fall outside of that neighborhood on Malcolmine near Magazine Street. What you see in front of you here is the design as it has evolved, and Andrenica, you obviously are well aware of this project, as we have. We've also had our bouts or sessions with the neighbors as we've evolved the design. And so this has also gone through the 106 process, where the State Historic Preservation Office has been very instrumental in helping us to get through it successfully. So here's a little map. What I didn't mention is that this project is, this request today is a part of essentially a multi-phase project. Technically, what we're applying for right now is for phase 1 and phase 2, the way that we have it ordered with the Housing Authority. And that covers those 52 units, which would all be built as duplex units. But also at 3249 Chapatula, it's a larger site where we'll be building 58 units, and those will actually be low-income housing tax credits involved in the financing process. Move on to the next one. All right, and this is the breakdown. Phase 1, which I alluded to a second ago, is phase 1 and 2. For the purpose of this is phase 1, because it'll happen simultaneously. It's 52 units, as mentioned, all of them duplexes. We're excited about this because, as Damon mentioned, this is a way for us to bring some affordable units that aren't low-income housing tax credits. This is something that is built at scale that we find in neighborhoods that we're entering. And it also allows us to work with smaller contractors. Ideally, this will give us an opportunity to work with DBE firms, as Steve mentioned. That's important to our company as well. And this gives us an opportunity for some of them to be the general contractor as opposed to just subs, because we get to break this work up among maybe 2 or 3 contractors. And that allows us, at this point, we're seeing the development costs coming in on the construction side, not the total development cost, but on the construction side at about $160 a square foot. So that eliminates some of the need for the traditional public subsidies that you see, or requires less of it. All right. No worries. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, there was an evolution of design, and I have to say I'm a lot more proud of what we have here, particularly on the top row. This is what you'll see mostly in the Riverbend neighborhood. After meeting with the neighbors, they didn't love very much what you see at the top left-hand corner, and with hindsight, I agree with them. And so, so this is actually Studio Kiro.
Okay.
But there you'll see the evolution of Jonathan Tate's design on the next slide. But before we go to that, so but Stephen alluded to this. The challenge becomes when you involve the State Historic Preservation Office, it becomes more expensive. And obviously, we want to provide quality housing. We want to put the cost in the quality of products with the home, the things that are going to impact things like people's utilities bills and the ease of livability of a space. And so that's what our initial focus was on. But we did find a way to make it work with the current design. Now, I will say at the bottom side, the left bottom, I've pretty much always been proud of that design. That is at the Malcolmine site. That originally had input from HDLC, but as you all may know, the State Historic Preservation Office, for a project like this, they supersede them in authority. And so we went back to the drawing board, even though we had total buy-in from the neighborhood and also the HDLC. This is what we came up with, which mirrors some of the buildings that we see in the building close to ours. So ultimately, what you see on the right side is the end product. This is the design that we referenced with the office of Jonathan Tate. The one up above was the original design. Folks in the neighborhood, State Historic Preservation Office didn't like the cantilever of the upper units. We thought it was a more efficient way to design the units and to get floor plans and maximize the space. However, after quite a long iterative process of the 106 review, we came up with the design that you see below. One of the concerns of the State Historic Preservation Office as well as the community is that they wanted to see buildings that were more at scale. I might beg to differ that these weren't at scale when there's a larger square block with more density right next to us. But certainly things like varying ceiling, roof heights and things like that, we took all of that feedback and came up with the design that you see below. All right, and the commitment to diversity here is just something as a DBE firm, as a company that is majority minority, we find it very important to make sure that we are passing along the opportunities. I always say, as a developer, I may or may not make a lot of money, but I sure as hell spend a lot of money. So with that, we have some power to determine, where we see those powers, where we see those dollars go. And it's very important in a city like New Orleans that we're spreading the love with more minority contractors. So we've already worked with Studio Kira, kind of an example of what I was talking about with on the construction side. I mean, we work with Jonathan Tabor. We also work with Studio Kira, who's had about half of the work on this project, which is a minority-owned firm. But there are also other things that we do to try to create opportunities when we have toyed with some ways to make sure that we have some investors who are also minorities. That hasn't always panned out, but we certainly do try. And then I think one of the key things is, what we've taken away is attorneys make a whole lot of money on these projects. So we've even sought ways, sometimes more than everybody, certainly on a per hour basis. And so we've sought to create relationships with African-American attorneys in past projects, and we continue to do so. So that we have, and that's something that nobody's tracking. That's just something that we do based on our own conscience and belief system. All right, and so here's the total development cost of the project. And so we're at 12.3 million. 9 million of that is hard cost. And that's where you'll see significant savings, even though, in this environment, it's really difficult to get strong construction pricing. But the numbers coming in from contractors right now are right in line with what we want to see. We might even be able to save a few dollars on that. But so we're pleased with that number. And as I mentioned before, it eliminates the need for as much public subsidy in this case. Can't promise that for the Chapatula site. As far as the source side of this project, there's about $800,000 in equity that we will raise for this project. There's an OCD grant of $2 million. We were awarded overall $3.5 million for this project. This is the amount that will be spent on this phase. The Federal Home Loan Bank of Dallas, we've already been awarded funds, so this is a proportional split. Because for the whole project, this is a proportional split of this, and we also will be applying for the Federal Home Loan Bank of Atlanta. And our team has had quite good success. We typically get the awards when we go for the Federal Home Loan Bank. So don't want to be overconfident, but I do feel pretty confident about it. There'll be some deferred developer fee of about $900,000 in this project, and then a traditional construction loan to round out the difference. And that is.
All right.
That's it. I think that's it. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
So what's your timeline from once you go to close?
So I expect it will close for the end of the first quarter.
No, I mean construction time after that.
Construction time after that. So we're still figuring that out. But I will say, I think 18 months to 2 years of construction is safe.
Total, or I mean, are you?
For this particular
Yeah,
phase.
I was gonna say this shouldn't take that long as well, but it's, you gotta move from site to site.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're not-
Exactly. We're working with smaller contractors, and I am being conservative. I don't have time for people, right? But I'm hoping that the contractors will tell me that they can knock it out in a year.
Right. And is there a plan if you can phase them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so things will be coming online.
Yeah, like, yeah.
Yes, immediately. It certainly won't take the whole time frame for
all
all of them. Right? We'll have a whole site developed for instance, 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, that makes sense. You talked about the pushback in the community, and the 106 process. And again, I can't overstate how distressing it is, that the section 106 process is being used in this manner to slow down these projects. And that is something that we are gonna have to talk about. And we're gonna have to talk about, that's not intentional in section 106 process. To stop the housing authority and its partners from redeveloping its inventory. That's what I'm glad you all were able to persevere. And it adds costs to the project. And I imagine that unfortunately this is not ameliorated all of the concerns. But at least it looks different. I mean, and I will say, I don't personally, as an advocate, as a former developer, people like what they like. And that's all about taste, and I understand the architectural standards in our neighborhoods. Those things are precious and need to be maintained, but also people like what they like. And some of it is taste. But I do know that some of the prospective residents, had concerns, and I think you all were very open to listening to those concerns. I will say that I think some of the quality of life issues that are often raised around these projects by the neighbors are more NIMBY nonsense. And I remember, and you want to state for the record that make sure that people hear that despite you all having to go through this process, Iris was interested in talking to prospective residents, people who would live in the building, and talk to them about what it looked like, and again, what it meant to them, what the design meant to them, not just from health and safety, because of course, Jonathan wasn't going to deny anything that was, but people needed to also understand what it meant to live in a building like that, and just because this is familiar doesn't mean that people understand it any better either. So.
Yeah, and I would say, we were very intentional. We always are, whether it's required or not, we're intentional about talking to the neighborhood. But in this case, you're absolutely right. We wanted to talk to the folks who would likely be there. So we talked to associations. I forget the name of the groups now, but panel has,
like the Citywide Tenants Association,
yes,
and the
exactly.
Resident Council.
Exactly. And like one I can't remember all the recommendations I certainly did. Make sure that we want to incorporate those things. Most importantly, one of the things that I do remember very clearly was storage. So we made sure that there's ample storage inside the house. That seems to be a strong concern.
And then remind me how that New Orleans is. We're going to be in the second phase, or are we on this one too?
This one too, as of just a pilot.
Gotcha. So that's why we're not showing up in social pieces. We show up in the operating. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. I was like, wait, are we in there? Okay. So that's and talking through, you talked about the lawyers. This is the kind of project that I know we've wanted to see in this market for a while. Scattered sites is always complicated, but now you can scale sites for pilots. They said it could be done, right? and multiple sites, not just small sites. I know the staff have been, preparing for this kind of complexity as a developer. How daunting is it for you to approach, what is this, 7 different sites? And you feel comfortable moving forward with it? Is there anything else that the staff needs? I know that they've been top-notch and professional, especially if they got to sign the paperwork. But is there anything else that, as a system, that we could be providing? Not a criticism of them, just this might have made it easier if.
I don't have that feedback, and I would gladly share it as it arises. But what I do appreciate, like for instance, when we met last week, I imagine that this is no secret that you are exploring abatements of sales taxes as well, and these are some things that, for instance, would help us to be able to meet some of the other expectations, like for instance, enterprise funding committees, which we've done before. And to be honest with you, Nick, I don't find this project to be that daunting because This is, with the exception that it's new construction, it's exactly what I cut my teeth on, is, you know, these smaller developments. I find this a lot easier. It doesn't have, you know, low-income child housing tax credit, which, you know, brings a whole lot of complexity to it. So this one is easier, and I hope that it serves a model.
And that might be the piece is that, so the finance New Orleans can be a part of a project like this, but the LAC.
I mean, I would welcome. I would welcome. You know, I look at scheming sources of uses, and I'm like, what else can I do? So,
Complex.
Alright. Okay, I think that's all I have for this one. And so you're gonna be back with us, or you may not be back, but we're gonna be presenting this in full, next month.
Next one.
Okay, but we're gonna, we are, and again, we just wanna make sure we get in the habit of, meeting with the developers, especially if something happens, the project has to be accelerated, you can ask questions. These deals are gonna be, they're complicated for the finance, for Finance New Orleans. But we wanna make sure we bring everybody along instead of dragging everybody behind us.
Yeah.
So we appreciate y'all coming back. Steve has been here, I think this is his third time.
Yes.
Second time, this is the second time in, well, it was third, but the meeting didn't happen.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, forgive us for that. So it is so that
no problem.
we can make informed decisions and, again, and help the staff respond to y'all in a timely fashion.
Whenever you like, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think that's it. And unless there's any objections, I'm gonna go ahead and adjourn the meeting.
Yeah, I have the programs ready. We can cover that on Wednesday.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so we're just gonna go over it twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we'll do it on Wednesday, just so everybody knows, we will be doing a program committee meeting beforehand. And then, doing an overview of these projects. And I will be able to talk about them and hopefully we'll be able to approve, the program committee recommend, Barone Law for approval, and then the board will take it up. And hopefully it'll get approved then. All right, and then we'll have, Iris Development back in January to approve their project. All right, so that's our plan. Thank you for joining us. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Welcome, thank you.
Bye bye.
All right. I'm glad I know, but this is a good way to see you. This is a good reason to see you.
Okay.